Wasn't it?
Heck, what a scene. It's like, you know, you see these, sometimes we play in clips of international parliaments where they start throwing punches and chairs get hurled everywhere. It was almost that bad last night in the Commons.
Yeah, it wasn't a good look, was it?
No, well, pressure is mounting on the Speaker of the House of Commons to resign after proceedings yesterday descended into absolute chaos.
Yes, Lindsay Hoyle allowed MPs to vote on a Labour motion calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, but that broke parliamentary rules and undermined an SNP motion on the same issue.
Well, it's claimed Mr Speaker was pressured into the change by Sir Keir Starmer, who feared that the SNP vote, if that went ahead, would split the Labour backbenches. Well, Sir Lindsay Hoyle later apologised.
I am, and I regret, with my sadness that it's ended up on like that, in this position. That was never my intention for it to end up like this. I was absolutely convinced that the decision was done with the right intentions. I recognise the strength of feeling of members on this issue.
Well, for more, our political editor Christopher Hope has this report.
Days in the House of Commons don't normally end with the Speaker fighting for his political future. But that's where we are. It wasn't meant to end like this. Today was a day when the SNP put down their motion calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The government tried to amend it, and Labour did too. Now, normally, only the government's amendment is accepted, but controversially, the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, agreed to allow the Labour amendment to go ahead. And that's where all hell broke loose. By 6 p.m. on Wednesday night, Penny Mordaunt had made clear the Speaker had put himself into the debate on Gaza, when really he should be standing aside and letting it take place. By 7 p.m, the Speaker was back in the House of Commons apologising for ending up where they are. We're told by his friends he wanted MPs to have a bigger choice of what to vote on, not just two motions by the government and the SNP. The Tories and the SNP, though, smelt a rat. They think he was showing some degree of bias towards the Labour Party. He, of course, firmly denies that. By tonight, by Wednesday night, as many as 33 MPs have signed a motion of no confidence in the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. There are some real doubts here, as I speak, that he can survive this week. It may be on Thursday he finds his position is untenable. It just shows to me how this year is all about the general election coming up, and shows how some issues like Gaza are just so political, they are very difficult to get involved with in terms of politics in the UK.
Well, let's talk to political commentator Andy Williams. Morning.
Morning.
Is he on his way out, Mr Speaker?
Well, I think he's in a very, very difficult position. You know, being Speaker of the House of Commons relies upon you having the confidence of MPs. In order to be able to adjudicate properly, in order to be able to run the business of the House and to get votes through, and I think...
And to be absolutely impartial.
Yeah, impartiality is the absolutely core principle of being Speaker, and I think the comparison I draw is to his predecessor, which is John Bercow. You know, John Bercow was a very, very, obviously very well-known, very prominent Speaker, but a very divisive one, because he was seen not to be impartial on Brexit, and I think it's very clear that John Bercow was skewing votes, let's say, and there will now be accusations that Lindsay Hoyle has done the same thing.
What do you make of claims this morning that Lindsay Hoyle was bullied by Sir Keir Starmer into accepting that motion yesterday, or indeed a backroom deal had been done between the pair?
I think that's quite unlikely. I think Keir Starmer is too risk-averse, he's so focused on winning this election. Doing something like that would put in jeopardy a sense of sort of fair play, really. So I think that's unlikely. What I think is more likely is that, and I don't know if this is the case, but it seems that the Speaker has let his personal views on a very emotive issue kind of cloud his judgment, and that's where he's going to have to ride out the next few days.
But why would he do that? Because he may have views on it, but if those views were, for example, for a ceasefire, we're not saying that Mr Speaker has those views, but if they were, well, the SNP motion would have covered those. It's the fact that it became party political.
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? Is that, you know, his decision made life easier for the Labour Party yesterday. Labour was in a really difficult position with this motion, and a number of Labour MPs who wanted a stronger line to be taken on Gaza were going potentially to rebel against Keir Starmer and the Labour line. And that, in the Speaker's decision, made life easier for Keir Starmer.
What did you make of the scenes in the Commons yesterday? I mean, MPs quite literally walking out in protest over this. I've never seen anything like it.
No, well, it was remarkable, but actually it does bring to mind the chaos of a few years ago over Brexit. When we were having votes late into the night and huge defeats for the government. So it does sort of bring back those sorts of memories. I mean, I received a message yesterday from someone who's very senior in Boris Johnson and Theresa May's number 10. And suffice to say, she was not a fan of John Bercow. And she said, absolutely terrible behaviour from the Speaker. This is worse than Bercow. And that was kind of the yardstick. So I do think, I mean, Penny Mordaunt was very critical yesterday. The government basically withdrew their cooperation. There will be calls for him to go, and he's in a tricky spot.
What about, I mean, you say you don't think Keir Starmer applied pressure. Whether we'll get to the bottom of it, I don't know. Quentin Letts in the Mail this morning, he's not saying he thinks this happened. He says, we learnt that Sir Lindsay was locked in argument with Sir Keir in the Reasons Room, which is just behind the Speaker's chair. Having the thumb screws applied.
I mean, look, politics is all about the art of persuasion, and not just persuasion, but putting people under
pressure. You shouldn't be persuading the Speaker.
Pressure. Well, the reality is that all sides of the House put the Speaker under pressure to try and, achieve the outcome that they want. It has to be done in the right way, of course, but there's no doubt that government will be trying to steer him in a particular direction. That's why it's such a difficult job. You have to be your own man. You have to be completely independent and impartial. And I think it's clear that he made a mistake yesterday. His judgment was wrong.
Do you think he'll resign? Or do you think he'll be pushed? Or do you think he'll cling on?
He'll obviously do his best to cling on. Speaker's one of the best jobs in British politics. It's great fun. It's very prominent. I mean, you need a big ego to be Speaker. Let's be realistic. And you have a lot of influence. You know, the fact that the vote went in the way that it did shows that being Speaker is a very, very important role. So he will be extremely reluctant to resign. I think he will come under pressure. My sense is that he probably will cling on. But if he's going to have some very difficult conversations and really defend himself.
This is very bad for British politics, and I say that really reluctantly because I know Mr. Speaker on and off for a long time, and I tell you what, he's a very nice man and all the rest of it, lovely fella. But if we have a Speaker in the House of Commons who is not trusted by Parliament, we know how problematic that has been for the past number of years since Brexit with John Bercow, who, again, I quite liked, I've got to be honest, but we can't have that again. We've got to have someone in that seat who people on all sides of the House trust. Yeah,
it is a trust thing, and I think, I hope that this morning and over the coming days, when the kind of emotion has subsided a bit, people will start to say, look, everyone makes mistakes. You know, I don't think anybody could truly say that Lindsay Hoyle has been a biased or an unfair Speaker generally. I think overall, as you said, he's a very nice bloke. He's widely, popular across the House. And I think, hopefully, people will see that and on balance decide he deserves a chance.
I'll tell you what strikes me about this, just as I was talking to you, was the fact we're talking about all this political hoo-ha. What we're not talking about is the fact that Keir Starmer's absolutely flip-flopped again and now gone for let's have a ceasefire in Gaza, which is not what he was saying a few months ago, which led to the resignation of people in councils, Labour seats, and even some people in Parliament as well, and people resigning from the shadow cabinet, because he wouldn't back a ceasefire. So now he's done a complete 180 again.
I think what this is showing is two things. Firstly, Keir Starmer, foreign policy is not his thing. He doesn't really have a strong sense of what his kind of foreign policy outlook is, and that will be a problem if he becomes Prime Minister. He will need to surround himself with people who really, really get it and who do have views. I think, secondly, it exposes the fact that he's a very inexperienced politician. People forget that, like Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer was only elected as an MP in 2015. Actually, he is not a sort of thoroughbred, highly experienced politician. He's not political to his fingertips. And sometimes that really shows when he has lapses in judgment like this.
OK, Andy Williams, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Do let us know what you think about all of that. Is it too much concern about parliamentary procedure? Or is it important to get to the bottom of these things? Parliament's got to work properly, otherwise what's the point of it?
Yeah, do let us know.
Let us know.
What you think.